The chamber buzzed with low murmurs, cameras rolling, tension already thick in the air. It was just another oversight hearing, until it wasn't. Former President Donald Trump had been called to testify. That alone was historic. But no one expected what came next. Jasmine Crockett sat calmly, her notepad untouched, her pen resting on the table like a sword waiting to be drawn. She had watched Trump sidestep questions all morning, deflecting with sarcasm, veiled threats, and loud jabs. Every time he interrupted someone, the air shifted. Then it happened. He turned toward her, smirking, and said, "And who even are you to question me?" The room tensed. Without raising her voice, without blinking, Rep. Jasmine Crockett slowly leaned forward, locked eyes with Trump, and said 4 bold words that would rattle the nation. "Sit down, Mr. President." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Reporters dropped their pens. Security shifted in their seats. Even seasoned politicians looked stunned. Trump froze, just for a split second, long enough for every camera to catch it. And in that moment, power shifted, not through shouting, but through truth wrapped in courage. The silence? Deafening. But Jasmine wasn't done yet. President Trump chuckled under his breath, trying to brush it off. "Excuse me," he said, voice rising with that familiar mix of mockery and menace. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Her tone didn't change. Her face didn't twitch. She spoke again, measured, calm, and cutting. "You walked into this chamber thinking fear and volume were the same thing as truth, but I came with neither." The room was no longer just watching, they were holding their breath. "I don't owe you reverence," she continued. "I owe this country honesty." Trump tried to interrupt, but Chairman Graves tapped his gavel sharply. "The witness will remain silent while the Congresswoman speaks." It was the first time Trump had been publicly hushed by authority in months. Jasmine glanced briefly at her notes. Then, with quiet force, she began listing names. George Floyd, Breonna Greer, Capitol officers attacked on January 6th. "You've weaponized pain, you've rewritten fear," she said, eyes never leaving him. "And still, you demand respect?" Every word hit like a hammer. Across the country, live feeds started to explode. Social media ignited. Hashtags trended. But Jasmine? She remained a storm in stillness. Her voice had become more than a challenge. It was a mirror. And Trump couldn't look away. After her exchange, there was a short recess, but Jasmine didn't leave the chamber. She sat alone, her hands clenched around something in her lap. A folded letter. It wasn't part of her prepared remarks. It wasn't from a legal file. It was from a mother in Michigan, a woman named Angela Wren. Jasmine had met her quietly during a visit to Flint months before. No cameras, no fanfare. Angela's son, a 17-year-old honor student named Marcus, had taken his own life. In his final journal entry, Marcus wrote about January 6th, how he felt his country had changed forever, how he no longer felt safe walking with his hoodie on, how he feared the future and believed no one cared. Angela had handed Jasmine the letter with shaking hands and said, "If you ever get the chance, please tell him my son's name." So Jasmine unfolded it now. Her voice cracked as she read, "My name was Marcus Wren. I wanted to be a teacher." The chamber fell silent again. Even Trump looked stunned, uncomfortable. Jasmine looked up and said softly, "This hearing isn't about politics. It's about pain." And just like that, walls began to crack. Hearts began to tremble. As Jasmine Crockett finished reading Marcus Wren's letter, something extraordinary happened. One of the Capitol officers seated near the back removed his hat and lowered his head. A ripple of silence moved through the room, not out of protocol, but out of something deeper. Respect. Trump shifted in his seat. The usual smirk on his face had faded into a confused stare, as if unsure whether this moment was real. No cameras could save him from this truth. No rally cheers could drown out the trembling emotion in the room. Jasmine set the letter down and said gently, "This is what leadership is supposed to protect. Not your image, not your ego, but our children." A soft sniffle echoed from somewhere in the gallery. Then another. This wasn't politics anymore. It was human. And Jasmine, still poised, didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She paused and whispered, "I speak today with the weight of a grieving mother's hope that someone, anyone, in power, would finally listen." Her eyes scanned the panel. Then Trump. She added softly, "And today, I'm done waiting." She hadn't raised her voice once, but somehow the whole world had heard her. For the first time in the hearing, Donald Trump looked small. His arms were crossed, his lips pressed tight. His gaze no longer scanned the room like a performer seeking applause. He looked away, and everyone saw it. Jasmine noticed, but said nothing about it. Instead, she opened a thin folder. Inside were photographs, 8 of them, all young, all gone. Victims of hate crimes, victims of police violence, victims of policies passed with carelessness and cruelty. "This folder," she said, holding it up, "is what silence protects." She set it on the table. "And for years, your words, your speeches, your tweets, your rallies, they've given silence a megaphone." Trump blinked fast. For once, he had no comeback. The chairman allowed her to continue, sensing that this moment was not about politics anymore. It was about reckoning. Jasmine leaned forward. "Do you remember saying, 'When the looting starts, the shooting starts'?" Trump didn't respond. "I do," she said. "So does the mother of an 11-year-old who now won't walk past a police cruiser without shaking." She paused, then said something raw. "You didn't just divide a country. You scared our children." And in that moment, even the loudest critics went quiet. After the hearing recessed for lunch, Jasmine returned to her office in silence. No cameras followed, just quiet footsteps and the heavy weight of what had just happened. On her desk sat a small envelope, no return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was a child's drawing, crayon on construction paper. A stick figure version of Jasmine stood holding a microphone, a bright sun above her, and little blue letters that read, "You are my hero." It was signed, Jaden, 9 years old. She sat down slowly, staring at it. Her hands shook. This was why she had stayed up late preparing, why she had fought through fear, why she had chosen not to yell, even when she had every reason to. Jaden didn't know about political strategy. He didn't care about polls. But he had watched, and he had felt something. Jasmine whispered to herself, "This is bigger than me." Then she wiped a tear and stood tall. Back in the chamber, Trump was preparing to go back on the offensive. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't coming back to defend herself. She was coming back to defend everyone else. And the storm was far from over. When the recess ended, the chamber felt different. Colder, sharper. Cameras were repositioned, microphones adjusted. Reporters whispered predictions. Would Trump explode? Would Crockett back down? She didn't. Jasmine Crockett walked back into the room like the air itself parted to make space for her. She carried no notes this time, just the folded child's drawing in her hand, Jaden's. Trump locked eyes with her as she sat. He smirked again, but this time, it didn't land. She didn't even look at him. She simply placed Jaden's drawing on the desk, adjusted her mic, and said, "Before I ask my next question, I want to remind everyone, especially the young eyes watching, that dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It endures." Her voice was steady. "Mr. Trump," she continued, "do you understand that your words carry more than sound? that they shape lives? He scoffed. My words? Have you seen what they say about me? Jasmine looked up, quiet as ever. I'm not here to talk about them. I'm here to ask why you never spoke up for the ones who needed you most. Trump leaned back, arms crossed, lips sealed. He had no answer, because the truth had already been spoken. As the hearing dragged into its fourth hour, news had already broken across every major network. Clips of Jasmine's confrontation were everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Headlines screamed. Crockett silences. Trump without raising her voice. Outside the Capitol, protesters from both sides had gathered, shouting, signs, chaos. But when a speaker was set up on the lawn and someone played the clip of Jasmine reading Marcus Wren's letter, something changed. The shouting faded. One woman wearing a red MAGA hat listened in silence. Her husband whispered, "What is this?" She answered, "A mom's pain." For 2 minutes, people stood still. Jasmine's voice, coming through the crackling speaker, had pierced through ideology. It spoke to the human heart. Back inside, she continued her questioning. Calm, relentless, honest. And for the first time in a long time, even those who came to attack her listened. That day, it wasn't just a hearing. It was a mirror. And in it, America saw itself. Fractured, grieving, angry, but also maybe ready to heal. All because one woman chose to fight with truth instead of fury, and the world couldn't stop watching. That evening, long after the hearing adjourned, Jasmine sat alone in her car. She hadn't turned the key yet. Just sat in silence, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, tears finally falling. Her phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. A quiet voice on the other end said, "Congresswoman Crockett?" "Yes. This is Angela Wren, Marcus's mom." Jasmine closed her eyes. Her breath caught. "I saw the hearing," Angela whispered. "I watched every second. You read his words like you knew him." Jasmine couldn't speak. Tears streamed. "I just wanted to say, thank you," Angela said. "You made him matter again." There was a pause, then, "And you made me proud to still believe in this country." Jasmine broke down. Silent sobs filled the dark car. That call wasn't televised. No likes, no retweets, no headlines. But it was the most powerful moment of her day. Because it reminded her why she did this. Not for applause, not for clout, but for the ones who had no voice. And tonight, that voice had echoed across the nation, louder than any scream. The next morning, Jasmine walked into her office to find a package waiting on her desk. No label, just a soft pink envelope and a small teddy bear inside. She opened the letter slowly. It was from a 13-year-old girl named Valeria in the Bronx. Her handwriting was messy, like she'd written it fast, afraid she'd change her mind. "Dear Ms. Crockett, my mom cried when you spoke yesterday. I've never seen her cry like that. She always says politics is fake and nobody cares about people like us. But last night she hugged me and said maybe I was wrong. That's because of you. Also, I've been scared to talk in class. But after what you did, I'm going to raise my hand today. Love, Valeria, 8th grade." Jasmine held the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. She had never met Valeria, might never meet her. But that one act of courage on the Hill had reached further than she thought possible. Not just across news channels, but into living rooms, classrooms, hearts. Jasmine smiled through tears, because this was the real power, not titles, not cameras, but one little girl deciding she mattered. Later that day, Jasmine stepped into the Capitol elevator, not expecting to see Donald Trump already inside. The doors closed, just the two of them. Silence. He glanced at her, then looked away. his posture stiff, his hands fidgeting slightly. She said nothing. But then, out of nowhere, Trump muttered, "That kid, Marcus, he was real." Jasmine turned slowly. "Yes," she said quietly, "he was real, and he's gone." Another pause. Trump nodded faintly. "I had a nephew, OD'd last year. Nobody talks about him." His voice cracked just for a second. Barely. Jasmine didn't reply to that. She didn't need to. But her eyes, soft, calm, human, held his gaze with something far stronger than spite. They said, "I see your pain, too." The elevator dinged. He stepped out first. Before the door closed, Trump turned back and looked at her with something Jasmine had never seen from him before. Not fear, not sarcasm, but recognition. And in that brief second, maybe even regret. Then the door closed, and Jasmine stood alone, heart pounding, because the truth had done something even power couldn't. It had touched him. That night, Washington, D.C. changed. The city, known for its spin and spectacle, pulsed with something rare. Reflection. Projected onto the side of a downtown building was a massive screen looping the moment Jasmine Crockett said, "You don't intimidate me." Crowds gathered beneath it, some cheering, others just watching quietly. An elderly black woman whispered to her daughter, "We waited a long time for a voice like hers." The daughter replied, "She didn't yell, she just told the truth." A group of students stood nearby, some filming for TikTok, others holding handmade signs that said, "Courage looks like this." Upstairs in her apartment, Jasmine watched the live stream on her phone, tears slipping down her face. Not because she was proud, but because the country had finally paused to listen, to feel, not at a rally, not during an ad, but during a moment of truth. And tonight, that truth was lighting up buildings, lighting up screens, lighting up hearts. And Jasmine, she knew tomorrow would bring more battles, but tonight she had given the nation something it hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next morning, Jasmine Crockett walked into her office carrying something no one expected, her late father's boots. They were old, worn leather, the soles patched more than once. He had worn them every day while working double shifts in the Texas sun. A janitor, a man who raised her on truth, not titles. She placed them gently on her desk, next to Jaden's crayon drawing. When a young staffer asked why she brought them, Jasmine smiled softly. He used to say, "Never forget who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise." Her father had taught her to speak up not with anger, but with integrity. And in those boots, he had walked through humiliation, racism, poverty, and still showed his daughter how to stand tall. As the staffer walked out, Jasmine stared at the boots for a long time. Then she whispered, "Daddy, I hope you saw yesterday." What she didn't know was that millions of Americans were already seeing her, not as just a congresswoman, but as a daughter carrying the strength of every silent fighter who came before her. And with each step forward, she carried them all. That afternoon, the unthinkable happened. In a short statement released to the press, Donald Trump's team issued a public comment. "Though we strongly disagree with Representative Jasmine Crockett on many political matters, we acknowledge her composure, her conviction, and her commitment to the truth. In moments like these, politics should take a back seat to humanity." The press went wild. Was it real? Was it a trick? But the words were there, in print. A subtle shift, a tremble in the foundation of Trump's usual bravado, and the moment was everywhere. News outlets, podcasts, reaction videos flooding social media. Did Trump just respect Jasmine Crockett? Back in her office, Jasmine read the statement and felt nothing loud, just a quiet breath. She hadn't wanted an apology, She had wanted accountability. But even the faintest hint of reflection from someone so rigid meant something. To her, to Marcus's mother, to Jaden, to every single person who had ever been told their pain was too political to matter. This wasn't a victory lap. This was a crack in the wall. And even a crack can let light in. The next weekend, Jasmine traveled quietly to Flint, Michigan. No cameras, no press team. Just her, a small suitcase, and the letter from Angela Wren folded in her jacket pocket. She arrived at a modest house with peeling paint and a small garden out front. Angela opened the door, tears already in her eyes. They hugged, no words. Inside, Jasmine was shown Marcus's room, still untouched, textbooks on the desk, his shoes neatly lined by the bed. Angela pointed to the wall where Marcus had drawn a mural in pencil, a school, a rising sun, and stick figures holding hands. One figure wore a jacket with the words, "Truth Matters." Angela whispered, "He wanted to be a teacher. Said one day he'd teach kids how to speak truth, even when it's hard." Jasmine placed her hand on the wall, trembling. "I think he already did," she said softly. They held hands in silence, both crying. No speeches, no politics, just shared grief and the beginning of healing. And in that room, Marcus came home, not in body, but in purpose. His voice, once silenced, had echoed through the halls of Congress. And now, through the heart of the nation. 3 weeks later, the House floor was unusually full, not just with lawmakers, but with young students from across the country. Jasmine had quietly invited them. Children who had written to her, children who had felt unseen, children who had been told to stay quiet. One by one, they stood in a semicircle behind her. Jaden was there, the boy who'd sent the drawing. Valeria from the Bronx came, her mother clutching her hand with pride. Jasmine stood at the podium, not as a politician, but as their echo. She unfolded her notes slowly, but she didn't read them. Instead, she stepped aside and said, "Today, I give the floor to the children." One by one, the kids read lines, some short, some trembling. "I want to walk outside and feel safe. My dad says truth is brave. I want to be brave. I want leaders who listen, even when I'm small." Some lawmakers wiped their eyes. Others turned away, pretending not to feel. But everyone heard it, a truth louder than politics. Jasmine stepped forward again, tears in her voice. "This is why we serve. Not to speak over others, but to make room for their voices." And in that moment, the House stood still. A few days later, Jasmine returned home after a long session. The sun had set. Her heels clicked gently on the concrete porch. Her body was exhausted, but there was something taped to her front door. An envelope, no return name, just a single line. "I've never agreed with you, but I see you now." Inside was a photo. It was of a woman, white, mid-60s, standing next to her grandson. He wore a t-shirt that read, "Truth Matters." There was no signature, just one final line written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for giving my grandson someone to believe in." Jasmine sat down on the steps and cried, not out of sorrow, but because something sacred had shifted. People were beginning to see past color, past party, past fear. They were seeing the truth. And it had nothing to do with winning a vote. It had everything to do with giving children hope. The kind of hope that starts with courage and ends with connection. The next hearing came quietly. No fanfare, no cameras flooding in, just routine questioning. But everyone was watching to see what Jasmine Crockett would say. As the session neared its end, she leaned into her mic, calm, clear. "I have one last question," she said. The room leaned in. "It's not for the witness, it's for all of us, for everyone watching, for the next generation asking, who we are. She paused. Are we brave enough to speak truth when it's inconvenient? A long silence followed. Then something rare happened. Applause. Not from the public gallery, but from fellow lawmakers. Even some across the aisle. And as Jasmine quietly gathered her notes and stood to leave, someone in the back called out, "Thank you, Congresswoman." She turned, smiled, nodded, and walked out, not as the loudest voice, but as the one who reminded America that truth, spoken calmly, spoken firmly, can move mountains, even if it starts with just 4 words. Sit down, Mr. President. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, if it reminded you of the power of one voice, don't scroll past. Do this for Marcus. Do this for Jaden. Do this for every silent voice still waiting to be heard. Like this video to help the story reach more people. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment below with just one word, how this story made you feel. And if you believe in stories that heal, unite, and inspire, subscribe now, because we're not just telling stories. We're building a movement, one voice, one tear, one truth at a time. Our truth matters. Jasmine Crockett. Sit down, Mr. President.